Hello, 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 and welcome to another live session from Getting Gritty with It, and with my comrade and partner, Yarif. What's up?
Hey Jamie, how you doing, buddy?
Good, man. And you know what? We're freaking doing phenomenal because for various reasons, there was a scrimmage today, and plus we have a phenomenal writer, one of our dedicated writers, one of the he's a video connoisseur, now. He's a legend on the mic, and so it's kind of cool to have him. His name is Yosef Borek.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction.
Tell us, where can we find you and stuff?
Well, obviously on our site, the Flyers Nitty Gritty site. Always on the Always Next Year podcast. That's where you can search pretty much anywhere you find your podcast. Other than, I don't think it's on Sprocket or whatever that one's called. That one, but it's on most things because we put it in through Anchor, and then. For Instagram and now Tumblr, you just spell out True Philadelphian Sportscast. And then for Twitter, it's True_Philly Sport.
So the only podcast that Joe, listeners that didn't catch that he is not on is Spittin' Chicklets. And that's pretty much it. So every other podcast you can find him
that
on.
Would be awesome.
Yeah, that would be.
If I got it, because, that would be awesome with Wit and Biz. Yeah, that would be pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's an amazing podcast. I agree.
But you don't have to have a filter on there. You can say whatever the hell you want with those guys.
Hey, you got the same thing going on here, Joe. Let it fly, buddy.
I'm guzzling down the summer ale right now because I think we all need one. I'm actually sort of surprised I didn't make myself a gin tonight. And I needed some gin to calm down and resurrect, freaking see what the heck was going on, to calm down some people who were about to jump off the cliff or jump off a bridge. But before we get there, and that is Flyers fans, but before we get there, let's talk about today's scrimmage. There was a lot going on in today. Joel Farabee shined. It was nice to see German Rupsoff get some time. He played well defensively. There were many comments coming out saying German was playing well defensively. Also, with that being said, Morgan Frost had a rebound scrimmage because Saturday's scrimmage didn't go as planned for Morgan Frost. That was probably one of his worst scrimmages of his young career, donning the Flyer sweater. And I know it doesn't mean nothing because it's practice, but I was just saying, I expected him to just excel because he normally does in this type of atmosphere, much like Joel Farabee does. But it was good to see the Farabee could be placed on any single line. Today he was with Grant and Pitlick, and he shined. And that whole line came together. Pitlick scored. Farabee scored. That line combined for 2 goals, and that's something that Derek Grant does. Joe, I'm going to start with you because you're our guest this week. What did you make of this scrimmage? And that's before we'll talk about the Carter Hart situation afterwards. But what did you make of this scrimmage overall with all the young guys? And then there was a comment by Kevin Hayes. In terms of using Alain Vigneault and quote unquote, it doesn't matter what type of vet you are. You could be a 10-year vet. You're on the same level as the youth, the same level as the young. It doesn't matter. So you can have 10 years in the league. It doesn't matter. He has no different pedestals. Everybody's on the equal pedestal here.
Yeah, well, I've been really impressed. Like you said, Farabee continues to impress. I brought that up when I was on with Steele earlier, Steele Flyers on his podcast. He continues to impress. Elliott is a guy that continues to look really good, which obviously that's something you like to see. Obviously, he played the whole, that wasn't planned, I don't think, but he played the whole 9 yards, as an expression would say, in today's game. So he's continued to look good. That's a very big plus. And like you said, I know we talked about him on the phone. If someone goes down, obviously we don't want this to happen, but if someone goes down that's more defensively inclined, I would think because of how good he's looked on the defensive end, German might be the guy that comes in that scenario because you're probably not going to throw in an offensive-minded person on a bottom line where you had a defensive-minded person that was working perfect and screw with that mojo when you have Rubtsov, who's great at defense. You don't know what you're going to get from him in the offensive end yet, but you know he's fantastic at defense. So I think him looking great on defense is very, very helpful. And then Frost rebounding is obviously immensely helpful just in case somebody in the top six were to go down for a couple games, because you're not going to really put Morgan in your bottom six. It's not beneficial to play a player like him in your bottom six. It might actually be harmful for him, actually.
And this is great to hear about German Rupsoff, because you are so high on him, and I am too. And it sounds like Joe is as well every time we talk and stuff. And the Flyers' top brass is for a reason as well. And I think it has to do with a lot of defense. You could start with him, but what were your thoughts of the scrimmage today and the youth? And if you don't mind, sort of touch on the defensive side of the puck as well, with like Matt Niskanen breaking up 2-on-1s and stuff. Matt Niskanen was looking pretty good, and the defense overall has looked good over camp.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so starting off with Ruptsov. So my opinion on Ruptsov, and I've been saying this for a while, is that I really truly believe he would have probably been that guy instead of Bunneman and Twarensky as the season went on. But not to take away from them, I think they're great young prospects. I think especially the bottom six. I just see Ruptsov as just having a higher ceiling, and like Joe said, the defensive game is already mature. Just so much about him. You know, he's really savvy. He's a great skater. He has playmaking abilities. He's got a really good one-timer shot. And if you develop him, he could potentially be a top six forward in the NHL. At the very least, I see him as a third-line player in the NHL. And I think the Flyers see that as well. Who could be either a PK guy, but I think he'll have kind of a long development process. So I do believe that it would be a great move to put him in. My ideal scenario would be to watch German Ruptsov kind of jump Bunneman and Twarensky and Andreoff, and even in some scenarios like Frost, like you're saying, you wouldn't want to put Frost on a fourth line, right? Like scenarios like that, I totally would love that. Is the coaching staff going to think the same way? There is like this fairness type of idea, but it's not really fairness. It's like, these players, Bunneman, Twarensky, these guys have put in the work all year. So I'm very interested to see how they play that. But it looks to me like from what we heard, and I'll talk on Zamula here for a minute. You're talking about defense. What we hear from Mike Yeo about his confidence in somebody like Zamula, maybe they'll see some risks taken, at least in those beginning games. Maybe they'll give these kids some opportunities. So as far as that goes, I would love to see Ruptsov. I'm not surprised. I like that they were playing around with line combinations. Overall, I'm not really surprised that things are going the way that they're going in the season. Or we were talking about this earlier, a 7-6 score. This is practice. That's a practice game. I don't expect players to drop in front of pucks and to give it their all in the corners. I do expect them to be a little more loosey-goosey, more like an all-star game type of performance. Yeah. And I don't think we saw that necessarily, but I expect that from the scores. Overall, I mean, it was really nice to hear that Giroux, I think he said prior to scoring the game winner that it was time to end it. I think I maybe read something like that, and I wonder if he's kind of gearing up. What I really want to see from these practices, more than the young kids, is actually where are the veterans coming in after sitting off, because they're the key. But from what I can tell and everything that I've read and kind of saw in the highlights, obviously it's a little tough to see for that live stream, everything. But from what you can see in that game, they're moving, they're skating. Those guys are moving like they're hungry, And I listened to Carter Hart in an interview with Jason Martinez earlier. I mean, he said, as soon as they announced to come back, they were all thrilled to continue what they were doing, and it looks like that mindset is still there.
Oh, yeah, Giroux has looked very, very good over camp, and he hasn't been talked about. I mentioned him in our practice reports and stuff a little bit. His slap shot is heavier than what it has been. I mean, his sting in Carter Hart. You see Carter Hart, like, it was, I think, Sunday's practice. He was just hitting blister after blister, and Carter Hart was, you've seen him, not be scared, but, like, shake a little bit after, so like, but G potting 2 goals today was big. Like you said, he potted the overtime winner. It was nice to see Jake Voracek play in his first scrimmage because of that Inkokusa test. Kept him out of that scrimmage. It was nice to see him get on the board, and it was nice to see Kevin Hayes pot a hat trick today.
That's what I was going to say, yeah. You got to bring him up.
And like that point. Line, like you had JBR, Hayes, and TK, and it seems to be whoever Hayes plays with and whoever TK plays with as well, it seems that they flourish. And JVR, you saw him come on at the end of the year, and he became more of a playmaker than he was in the past. And he's always been that goal scorer, but passing wise, it just seems that his passes were more crisp. He was had his vision down a little better than what it has been in the past. So I was pretty impressed with JVR. But it's nice to see JVR's line as a whole, succeed. It was to me, it was a great day. The Frost line was really jumping. Frost paired with Bunny and stuff. It was to me overall. I take away from this, like you were saying, you're not diving in front of pucks, but Matt Niskanen did to break up a 2-on-1. But it is in the same token, they're not blocking shots. Standing there, waiting, and stuff. So, but
there was also
no, go ahead.
I was gonna say there was also a play. I think it might have been before the stream came on, but I know they tweeted it where they said Ghost broke up the play and then joined the rush. So he looked pretty good in today's game as well, working his way back. And we know Mike Yeo made it apparent to go to him himself separately and say, we know how much work you're putting in. And yeah, offense and how a quarterback of the power play is going to be interesting because you want that offense in the postseason, but you also don't want inconsistency in the defensive end in the postseason. So you kind of have to see how he looked today. If he looks like he looked today, then he's set. But if that's not consistent.
Just to add to that, I don't mean to cut you off, but imagine if Ghost actually comes back to form. But 2 years ago, what was he, 10th in votes for Norris at one point? Or a couple years ago? Again, let's not say he's a North. Well, let's not say he's yeah, right. That's insane. Well, let's not say he'll even hit that level. But the Flyers already have a pretty scary defense.
Oh yeah.
If he's back on track, outside of getting Patrick and Lindblom back, which is all you really think about this team going to full force, how scary it is to compete against. What weakness do they have on the back end?
Especially with Zamula.
It is
and
funny
Friedman.
And Friedman.
After practice and Ghost presser, that's exactly what he said. He said this is the best he's felt in a long time. Actually, finally had both of his knees, repaired and cleaned out, and he said he doesn't hurt anymore. When he goes to turn, or stuff like that. I guess he was feeling that, and it was evident in his skating. You just don't go from being such a fabulous skater to a guy that can't keep up with Yuri Laterra. Not saying Laterra's so slow, but I'm just saying. You know what I mean?
I had to bring up Laterra.
No, I'm just saying. You know what I mean?
He was pretty slow.
It just doesn't happen. That means that something is right.
I totally agree with that. Slow isn't always the worst thing. Michael Hanzus was still a great player to the very end. You know what I mean? It's Chris Pronger was never fast.
Michael Hodges had a lot more talent than Yuri Laterra.
Well, that's kind of what I'm saying. It's not just that. Well, Laterra without the skating was, he was never.
Laterra also wasn't a wise human being. Let's just put it. Let's just to kindly not get into it.
We got to go on.
I do want to hear what Joe has to say about Hayes, though. I think you mentioned Hayes having a hat trick today. That is a really big deal. We need Hayes to come in strong right now because that 1-2 of Hayes, Couturier, again, Hayes, Couturier, then you have a combination of guys who can go down the middle for the bottom two. That is immensely important for this playoff run. And obviously including Provorov and Niskanen and then our goalie, which we'll get to that a little bit down the line. But you know what I mean? All of that is immensely important to compete. And that 1-2 punch of those guys, I think it's underrated. I think actually JVR's season overall, because the season started so slow productivity-wise, I think JVR's season might even be underrated to some degree.
Yeah, and he was on pace to score another 25 to 30 goals.
Yeah,
this year. He finished the year with 19 goals, and that was in about, I think, 64, 63 games played or something.
I'll look it up.
And he wouldn't have, I think it was 63 to be honest, but I could be wrong by that. But in any sense, there were 13 games left. He was going to miss the rest of the 13, but he was well on his way for potting 25 to 30 goals. And I think he finished with I think it was 42 points or something.
So you're very close, Jamie. It was 66 games, and he had 40 points, which is slightly slower pace than last year. But again, if you look at that for Giroux and Couturier, again, they all started slow offensively. Outside of Lindblom and TK and Provorov, productivity was an issue for most players this year in the early stretch.
It was, what they're accustomed to from the previous regime. It's a lot harder for just veterans to just come in here and say what they've been in the past and say, okay, flip the switch, and here and now you have AV. I mean, it's not just that, taking it into context. There's different factors. JVR's wife was also pregnant at the time. You know what I mean? So she, obviously there's things going on there and weighing on his mind. And I hate to say it, but I have a wife here with 2 kids, myself. So like if something's messed up, it's going to weigh on me. So I can only imagine what it's like for an athlete to just put that aside and just go out and play, a game for 60 minutes. Kind of tough. Same thing with Claude Giroux. And the sleep aspect of that new baby. He's coming home, late at night, 1, 2, 3 in the morning,
Elliot 2 years ago, right?
Exactly. And that's what I mean. Like, you're coming home late at night. Well, doesn't mean that the baby's sleeping at that time. So you're coming through the door. Here, you got to help your wife because she's been with the baby and she's trying to get rest. So it's a whole different aspect there. It's tough. It's a lot tougher than what people just make it out. And I'm not giving excuses, but that's just the nature of the beast. But in any sense, Joe, do you have any more to say on Hayes? Because if not, for people jumping off.
I mean, I think he just showed, obviously he played great in New York when AV was in New York, and he brought in a guy that knew his system. It brought a comfortability to the locker room right away. And he also played, I mean, sometimes I think he's one of those guys that the plus-minus stat is a little bit deceiving, because sometimes the plus-minus stat can be a little bit deceiving. I think he was a -6. He played better than a -6 on defense for people that look into it like that. So I would say he's a guy that stat's a little bit deceiving, because obviously at times, due to injuries, we had some of the guys that we called up on lines with Hazy, and just naturally those guys wouldn't be as seamlessly intact with him if it's not the guys that are normally on lines. We heard quotes already from scrimmages, like I wasn't from different guys. I wasn't playing on normal lines, so we had to get used to it. So that's the same thing, obviously, in games. So that'll probably bring down your plus-minus attack. But I think he was immensely great on defense, and having him with Coots significantly helps you in the playoffs, because you have 2 great guys on your penalty kill rather than just one. So.
And it's great that you mentioned Coots, because he also potted a goal the day after he was nominated for this, as a Selke finalist. And he didn't know if he was going to have credit for the goal, but he was, and he did confirm it, following the scrimmage today. And it was just nice to see him compliment Joel Farabee afterwards. It was nice to see him compliment, it seemed that Morgan Frost has been taken under his wing. Like Sean Couturier has taken Morgan Frost under his wing. And Morgan Frost mentioned that also in the presser following the scrimmage as well, saying that it's great to learn the game from a Sean Couturier, because he doesn't make many mistakes. So he
does not.
Pre-game, and he doesn't. He really doesn't. When he does, he holds himself accountable following the game as well. He's very hard on himself. But moving on, because today there was gasping for air. Today was a day where people had their hands on their heads. They were wiping their eyes to see, and watching something, whether it be the live stream or watching the tweets, from Twitter and whatnot. And yes, a young Carter Hart did leave. Okay, he did leave the scrimmage midway through. So it was about a period and a half into hockey. Here goes Carter Hart off the ice, and man, that was a mic drop. And the tweets were just flowing, and people were saying he's injury prone. People have come out, and I saw that, the injury prone tweet. I saw that on numerous occasions today. I also saw that, oh my God, the Flyers are cursed. Finally, they have a team that is good enough to propel them, into an extended playoff run, and it all ends because here goes Carter Hart off the ice. And lo and behold, thankfully, and I say thankfully because there were a few media personnel that, and I'm not going to spitball, but in any sense, thank God John Clark saved the day and Colby Cohen, and they sort of calmed down the Flyers fan base from jumping off the Ben Franklin Bridge tonight. And in a sense to where it was confirmed from Colby Cohen, and I don't know how he got this, but he did tweet this out, quote unquote, that Carter Hart was suffering from back spasms, and that is the reason why the Flyers pulled him and didn't allow him return into the scrimmage. Now, there goes the injury-prone, things, because it's not an injury. Joe, I'm going to start with you. You don't want me to go on this rant because I'm just, I've had to calm down the base, throwing it out. Let's pray for Carter Hart like we should pray for Nolan Patrick. There's no difference between Patrick, Hart, or Lindblom. Okay, we should all treat them all the same, right? At the time they were all injured players, right? So let's all pray. Let's not jump to conclusions on what it may be. Joe, what do you make?
Well, I think back spasms, if you're coming back in a quicker process, like I know when I was playing sports, that's something you can get easily. If you're someone that plays a lot of sports, you don't have a lot of breaks in season. If you're coming back quickly from only having a week off, back spasms are something that you probably be most susceptible to. So I don't think that's that big of a deal. It's almost like if someone says, oh, they tweaked like a minor muscle, they'll be out 2 days. It's like, well, that makes sense because they haven't been playing for 3 months. Like any little minor stuff like that, that's like a 2 to 3 day thing, kind of makes some sense because you're moving a lot quicker than you would ever move. And I know that a lot of people cited that in the quotes. I think Loppy brought it up in some of his quotes today about they didn't even start really thinking yet about the round robin because of how quick everything's been moving. Everything's moving so quickly. They've really only thought about the exhibition game, and then they're going to eventually start thinking of the other. So like that's how quick everything's moving here. So that's why I think you're going to see some of those ticky-tacky things, and it's not back spasms, just something. You usually get over in a couple days, if not a day. So it's not really too big of a thing.
Yarif, I know you're chomping at the bit there because I'm going to go on this rant, but I know you're chomping at the bit to say something, and it's not that I'm very hard on the Flyers fans. I love them all, and I love them for supporting us. But when the tough hits the fan, it's like it's doom and gloom. It's like when somebody leaves the ice, it's you're done. And the season is done. We shouldn't even pack our bags to Toronto.
Well, 2 days ago was what? Jake Voracek was the last end of the world, right? So, listen, I can understand why people are concerned, but again, it's a scrimmage game at practice. If any single player has uncomfortability, I'm going to pull them out of that game if I'm the medical staff, especially your starting goaltender for the playoffs, which start pretty soon. And again, the first game is a preseason game that he might not even play in to begin with. So that gives him, another 2 weeks or whatever. Like maybe his preseason is the round robin game since it doesn't really matter if we end up at 4. Like it's kind of irrelevant for us. They're also preseason. So it's like, I think that's how they're going to treat these games up until we get to those games that really matter. So if Carter Hart has some uncomfortability, they're going to pull him. If Brian Elliott has some uncomfortability, they're going to pull him because it's not worth it because we have more important games to play. So that was my attitude when I saw the story. My assumption immediately was precautionary reason.
What story?
Well, that he was pulled off during the game.
But that's right. My thing. Okay,
Go ahead,
Flyers
Jamie. Let it go,
Well,
Jamie. Just let
Flyers
it
fans
go.
are very knowledgeable fans. They're not stupid by any means, all right? Because I'm a fan myself.
Agreed.
I will call myself a fan, even though we are close to the team and stuff. I'm still a fan of the Philadelphia Flyers. So we're not stupid by any means.
We're
Okay,
we're
it's a
nerds.
scrimmage. It is a scrimmage, all right, a scrimmage to where if he goes off the ice, it could be an equipment issue. It could be, hey, you know what? I took that puck hard. Why stay in there? Because I was telling you about Claude Giroux. Claude Giroux has just been, I don't know if he's honed in on his slap shot during the off time or what, but his slap shot, I'm telling you, is like stinging, Carter Hart. And I noticed it a few times. And it's not saying nothing bad about Carter Hart.
It's that dad strength. It's that dad strength they talk
he's
about,
just
right?
determined, and you can see it in his face. He's having
That.
fun, but he's very determined because he wants that cup. That's something he's been chasing. You already know.
Oh, yeah.
So like that's my point. So if he has some uncomfortability, plus Carter Hart didn't have the best game today either. I'll say that. And it's to be expected. You're not always going to have a good day at camp. You're going to have your best. You're going to have some great days, but you're also going to have your bad days. And this was a day, honestly, I'd like to see him have a bad day during the scrimmage because I want to see how he's going to rebound here on Thursday's scrimmage if he's healthy enough to play, with back spasms, So my thing is this, right? Nobody knew what was going on. Nobody knew if he suffered an injury. Bill Meltzer put out a tweet, and that should have calmed the storm, saying, I did not notice anything significant in Carter Hart. He wasn't hobbling. He wasn't doing nothing. You know what I mean? He just skated off the ice. Like he didn't suffer from an apparent injury. So that should have calmed down the storm. But it just continued and spiraled. And it's honestly like the Flyers are so loaded. Where I'm getting at, Flyers fans, the Flyers are so loaded this year. This year is the Flyers' year. It doesn't matter who the hell is going to go down because they're still going to have an extended playoff run, and I'm here to freaking put my bottom dollar on that. I am very confident in Brian Elliott if Carter Hart did miss 2 or 3 games to come in and withstand that until Carter Hart can become healthy. Keep it in mind, Brian Elliott was 2-0 against the round-robin teams in Boston, Washington, and Tampa Bay. He beat Washington twice. He was 2-0 against these round-robin teams. He didn't play Boston. He didn't play. He was 2-0 in general against the round-robin teams. He is a veteran guy who looks sharp this year. He looks like back into like his St. Louis Blues days. Then you also have an Alex Lyon who has stolen a game for the Flyers this year against the Colorado Avalanche to where not many people gave the Flyers a shot. But you know what? That seems to be the common theme this year anyway. Because let's be honest, Flyers fans, the Flyers weren't supposed to be in this situation, right? They were supposed to miss the playoffs. New Jersey Devils were supposed to be in front of them. The New York Rangers were supposed to be in front of them, right? Before the season began, correct? How many analysts had pegged Jersey ahead of the Flyers, the Rangers ahead of the Flyers, Carolina Hurricanes ahead of the Flyers? So you know what? The Flyers weren't supposed to be in this situation anyway. So that's where I'm like, who the hell cares? Because you know what? What's going to happen is going to happen. And the Flyers are so loaded depth-wise. I don't care who. It's not that I don't care who goes down, but Morgan Frost could plug in. You could have German Rubtsov plug in. You could have Carson Shorinsky plug in. You could have Connor Bunneman plug in. You could have Alex Lyon plug in, and then you got Ustimenko to plug in. The Flyers are loaded. They are loaded. And I'm telling you, they're going to the Cup. I don't care who the hell is on his roster by the time they go to the Cup. Because it's just, you just see it from what the players are saying. Like today. Oh, man, I don't know what happened to Carter. Some people didn't even know he left the ice. So now whether that's
Kevin Hayes didn't know he left the ice.
And Lappy.
Yeah, Lappy barely knew either, yeah. But it's funny that a player skating around who has to be by the goal, he's like, oh, crap, that wasn't Carter? Oh, my bad, I didn't notice, guys.
Well, because they're not all sitting there wondering. They're not doing the same thing that, that Flyers Twitter is doing.
No, I'm just saying when he skated back around the goalie, he just didn't notice who it was.
And we love him, and we love the Flyers fans. And I'm not harsh on him. I'm not mad at him. I'm not that. But all I'm saying is, and I think you guys would probably be on board with that, is just calm down, because you know what? Somebody else will come in. And it's happened throughout the entire season. Oscar Lindblom, goes out with an unforeseen, cancer situation. And I'm not going to say one player. There were multiple players that stepped in at different times, And Nolan Patrick didn't play the entire season. Multiple players stepped up at different times. And then they go, and Chuck Fletcher made the best trade deadline acquisitions in acquiring Nate Thompson and acquiring a Derek Grant. And it solidified that center position, which Nolan Patrick is not here today. So it didn't matter. And, of course, there were other injuries. JVR going down. It didn't matter. Somebody plugged in. Michael Raffle going down with multiple injuries. Didn't matter. Scott Lawton going down for 20 games. Not saying it didn't hurt. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that the Flyers used the strength of their system, and that's what they're going to use in Toronto. Correct?
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. They've had the next man up mentality the entire year. They also have the I said this in Steele's podcast too, the family vibe mentality, which what team in Philadelphia also had the family vibe mentality? The 2017 Philadelphia Eagles, just pointing that out. And what did they do? They won the Super Bowl. So
and they lost their star quarterback, which would have been
they did. Yeah.
To Carter Hart, right? And
don't even say that, because
but I'm just saying no. But what I'm saying is that Carson Wentz was the leader of that team, much like Carter Hart, is a leader of the Philadelphia Flyers.
Well, it's a sign of a championship caliber team, one that can continue to roll regardless of the one special player. That's why when everybody freaks out over one player or packaging up these huge deals for one guy from a team, none of that stuff actually makes any sense, because you need an entire good team to win a championship. You look at every team that won a championship, you literally look from top down and you're like, wow, that team is stacked. And you're like,
so you're saying you don't like Buffalo's trade for Jeff Skinner?
No. Well, I don't like their contract. I actually hated their Ryan O'Reilly trade.
That was terrible.
That's the one that would actually kill me, and I would imagine Jack Eichel feels even worse about it, considering that was his best friend on the team as well. And this is stuff that people don't consider. It's like there is a family element. This is what I was talking about, intangibles, the ability to love. That's why I use the word love your other teammates, because that's how a family behaves, right? And they all lift each other up. And they all roll in and out regardless of who's good and who's the best. They all support each other. It's super rare to get on that type of pace. And winning usually facilitates that. And our team, I totally agree with you. I think even if Carter Hart were to go down for a couple playoff games or a substantial amount of time, I do feel like the Flyers can move forward with Brian Elliott. It's not the ideal scenario.
No, definitely not ideal. Definitely not.
And maybe and honestly, we don't know if Carter Hart is the ideal situation, because he is a rookie in the playoffs. And I think he can definitely handle it. I mean, I believe in him as being a franchise caliber player. But overall, I mean, that's also a risk. We have a guy with experience right behind him. Like, people just need to relax and let things flow. I think that's overall where we're at. It's like trust the process, right? Like we talked about it. It's a kind of a joke. But, look at what happened throughout the season. Let AV do his thing. If you say AV complaining in the media, then we have a problem. Yeah. But up until then, but that's usually a problem, which means there's a locker room issue.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
He might have lost it. He might have lost the locker room. So we see that stuff happen. AV is still calm and cool, and I don't see any problems. I think this is the beginning of a very fun playoff experience, hopefully.
Yeah, and it's not that, when I saw that, in terms of Carter Hart, it wasn't like I didn't hit my hand on the table or something like that, because when, a Carter Hart, listen, no question, Flyers fans, this team can ride with Carter Hart for sure, and he's a phenomenal goaltender, and he could definitely lead them to the promised land, and he will do that. So when you see it's like your Reef just said, it's not an ideal situation to say, oh my God, there goes our franchise goaltender, and it's not like, oh man, what the heck, it's definitely not ideal. But Cooch made a very good comment following in his presser, and I want to touch on that. And he said, some people seem to forget about Brian Elliott. Like the Moose played well, this season, and stuff. So he said, obviously, Carter Hart is a very good player, and he is a good young player, and he was very good for us. But don't forget about Brian Elliott is pretty much what he's saying, that they are able to withstand, sad to say, losing Carter Hart for X amount of time because Brian Elliott is back there, and so some people twisted his quote saying, oh, it doesn't sound good for Carter Hart, when I could understand where they're coming from because he mentions, Brian Elliott, but he's just trying to calm the storm down to Flyers fans and abroad as well, saying, hey, it's not the end of the world. Carter Hart, went down. It sucks, of course, but the team still goes on, and they will go on with Brian, Brian Elliott. Now, if any one of you guys have more to add to this topic or this situation, feel free to do so now, or we'll move on because there was another big topic that I think that you guys will like.
The only thing I had is to prove again that your cup contending team is Hart. The only thing he struggled with a little bit in his stats was obviously some on the roads play, and obviously who stepped up for that Moose. So that's obviously what Cooch was also getting at. I would think he was thinking back to as well how much he stepped up on the road, and that helps that's how they have a great relationship off the ice, but that obviously helps Carter Hart. He knows his role model goaltender can also piggyback him if he is having some issues as a youngster in one aspect of his game, which is playing on the road a little bit, which you can expect. The guy's in his early 20s. Most guys are not even goaltending at that age. Most goaltenders come up 23
right.
or 24 years old.
Sometimes 26, 27.
Yeah, sometimes 25, 26. Yeah, nobody's usually, other than Prices of the world, in their early 20s in the league. So.
And that's what Carter Hart is. I mean, I think that's a great point. He's not supposed to be here. He's not supposed to be our starting goaltender. It's a complete luxury. Having said that, I'm imagining that, a couple weeks down the line, we're not even going to be talking about this. We're going to be talking about something else, and because somebody's going to get injured. We have to be very honest with ourselves. Someone important is going to get injured. At some point, they might miss a game, but that's the whole point of having this ridiculous depth. What?
Maybe more. That not just one
Inevitably.
Game. And like, you had to prepare yourself for this. I mean, that's what I mean. Fans, because Flyers are very knowledgeable. So I guarantee the majority of Flyers fans knew that there were going to be some injuries. When you rush people back, like Joe mentioned earlier, you're rushing these athletes back, saying, hey, let's go. And you're trying to ramp them up. You have one exhibition game, and then all of a sudden you start technically, the round robin is playoffs because it's for the round robin statistics will count towards the playoff statistics. So technically, it's part of the playoffs, not the actual playoffs, but it's part of the playoffs. So like when you're thrown into these intense games, because the Flyers may not see like, oh, okay, this is just some fine tuning, and that's what pretty much AV has said. We'll use that as fine tuning and see. How we go along, and if we move up, we do. If not, it's not the end all. So I really like the Flyers angle that they're taking on this round robin, which leads me to, what is your faith in Alex Lyon? Yarif, I'm gonna start with you. Alex Lyon is a goaltender that's been around the league. He's 27 years old. He will be an unrestricted free agent at year's end, which would be, October 31st. That's when the contracts expire. So November 1st is the target date as of right now for NHL free agency. So he will or will not be here next year. We don't have to answer that now. But do you have faith if, God forbid, just God forbid, say Carter Hart or Brian Elliott get hurt, for Alex Lyon to be the backup, and eventually, if his number did get called upon, would you have complete faith in him stealing that game?
That scenario would be very funny. Alex Lyon, Ustamenko. It'd be an interesting experience. So what I would say overall is I do have faith in Carter Hart's mental ability. I don't see him as a pure athletic goaltender. So I don't know if he's going to come in and steal the show ever at the NHL level, but I do believe he can be an adequate to good backup, especially if he just is as mentally sound as he is now. Like his ability to play those multiple overtime games, ability to step up for the AHL. The skill level isn't there in comparison to some of our elite prospects, but the game is there at a pro level. I think the Flyers feel comfortable with him playing on the bench role, having to come in for Elliott. I don't think you'd be ideally wanting to go through the playoffs with him, but I don't think it'd be the end of the world. I think he can stand up when he needs to. I think if the team buys in around him, he could surprise everybody. I think just like most NHL backups or even third strings, they have their ability to put up, success stories as well. And I think Alex Lyon, again, being so intelligent for one, and his ability to, I think, stay calm would help him in that type of experience. And it's also kind of like, you got nothing to lose type of experience. We've seen it happen before. We've seen backup goalies look like elite players for an entire year, and then kind of regress back into their backup role. So maybe we see, if Alex Lyon, who's 27 years old, I believe, maybe if he was put in that position, you would see him elevate his game. It happens, So I wouldn't say it's the ideal situation, but it wouldn't be the end of the world in my mind, especially with a combination of Ustamenko, who's a talented, I would say slightly more talented, but much more raw than Alex Lyon. We've been in worse situations. I'll say that.
Yeah, that's a great point. We've been in worse situations in terms of the goaltending, situation at the Flyers. Have been sued for years and years and years. It seems that, they could have an injury. But again, the Flyers' depth within their system will be tested at this position. And, Joe, you could touch on Alex Lyon. And what do you make of, even Ustamenko from Belarus? Possibly, if his number's called as well, you factor in.
Well, Lyon's a guy, I think we have, like you always say, Jamie, everybody develops at different rates. We never really needed him much other than in his age 25 season. In 17-18, he played 11 games for us and started 7. And in those games, I put down here, he had a 905 and a 275. So that's actually pretty good. Yep. Especially that's like backup numbers right there. So If you can do that, those are backup goaltender numbers already. And then the second year is when he struggled, but he only played 2 games, so you can't base anything off of that. And then this year he played 3 games and played his best game. I think sometimes with goaltending, especially, obviously, it takes that coach to come in and say, hey, I have faith in you stepping in. And obviously AV did that because you put him in there against one of the best offensive teams in hockey and one of the best teams in the West. So you're not going to do that if you don't have faith in the guy. So you basically said, we have all the faith in the world in you, and he answered, and that was 6-3. We won that game 6-3 against them, and that was basically on the back of him and Couturier. So I would say that's a big thing moving in. Guys, like we talked about a couple minutes ago, some guys hit at 27. Rittich, I think, was 27 last year, something like that. When he took off, Koskinen was 29.
All
Francois
the time.
was 29. Yeah.
Sean Burke back in the day.
Yeah. Tim Thomas had some of his best seasons with Boston in his 30s. So, I mean, you never know with goaltenders. And that's what – and then Cujo got better as time went on, too. So, you never know with goaltenders. I think he's a guy that you can rely. I think Ostamenko also is a very great developing kid. You don't expect Pirlo pointed this out when I talked to him before. You don't expect goaltenders or scouts to be able to pick someone from Belarus and pick them out like that. That just shows how good our scouting department was, because you don't normally say, oh, where am I going to go to find a pretty good goaltender? Oh, Belarus. Yeah, let's scout over there. Like
Thank
that's
you,
not
Captain.
that's not normally your first thought. So like finding a guy like that, he's a goaltender that's also hard to pick what type of goalie he is because he has good positioning fundamentals, but also is a great anticipator. So like if you had to tell him to a GM what you would put him as, I think it would just be kind of a combination of both. Like you have like a guy that can turn into a starter for you potentially. So
Yeah,
that's
agreed.
what I would put it at, and that's why it's going to be interesting for the Flyers because they could give Lyon if he wants a 1-year deal again, a 1-year deal to keep him around and have him as a backup or third stringer because Yarif pointed out Ostamenko's raw, so you're going to want him, I think, to have a little bit of time with the Phantoms. He only had, I believe, 5 games, so
Right.
you're going to want more than that, I would think. Yeah, so I would think you would want more than a few games, a handful of games with the Phantoms. So that would be my guess, but I could see Lyon if we don't keep Elliott because of the cap staying the same to save a little bit of money. You could potentially see him as the backup if AV actually has that confidence. And especially, we hope this doesn't happen, but especially if there were injuries and he stepped up in the postseason, then that would be easy. I could easily see that.
Here's the thing, right?
Save money.
This is where I'm getting at in terms of this, in terms of flight. Okay, I get told all the time, you're too positive. You know, referring to me, you know, from people. You're a very positive guy, you know, for the Flyers. Cool, I am, because they haven't done anything yet to prove me wrong otherwise in this particular year. So where I'm getting at is, name other teams that have 4 goaltenders that you could plug in there and possibly steal a game the way the Flyers do right now for the playoff round.
There might be one. Yeah, I was just about to say that would be the only other team.
That would be about it.
I mean, Washington has a combination of Holtby and Samsonov. Like, I agree that we
Penguins have 3.
Yeah, like
Smith was supposed to be their backup this year before their
cap.
Struggled this year.
Well,
Tristan Jarry had a hell of a year. You know, rightfully so. But,
here's kind of my point is, like, I think what is actually happening, and I do agree with your sentiment that when's the last time, let's just say that the Flyers had 4 goaltenders that we didn't have to go like, oh yeah, this guy can just leave town. You know, like we don't really have that scenario right now, right? We have other young guys we didn't even talk about.
When was the last time we had 2 goaltenders that we were very confident in, really?
That's my point. But I think it's also, again, I'm going to give the coaching staff here credit. I think it's a reflection of where our team is. Like, if you look at the team under Hackstall, and I don't want to jump on Hackstall, but we tried 8 goalies. None of them worked, right? Like, they got injured, right? Some of them worked, but they couldn't play well under his system. I would bet that even if we had to go to Ustamenko, with this team in front of him, his numbers would still look pretty decent. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he could steal some games and everybody's like, oh my God. But again, it's a reflection of the way the team plays as well. It's a huge chunk of the performance and the numbers.
And that's exactly what I was going to say is because you saw during the Alex Lyon game where Alex Lyon, you know, played well against Colorado. Felipe Myers had one of the best games and stuff like that. You know, Travis Sanheim stepped up his game. There were multiple defensemen. I'm just speaking defensively. You know, defensemen. Provy and Niski were going to do that anyway. They were going to sit in front of bullets all day long anyway. But I'm saying the defensemen really stepped up. And a core defenseman, all 6, Braun, they all stepped up. You know, and that's exactly what would happen in this scenario is that they would step up. And why I say, prove me wrong then. So, right now, we stand correct. So for people saying, no, I don't think that would happen, well, prove me wrong. Because in the beginning of the year, said the Flyers would make the playoffs. I was called crazy. In the beginning of the year, I said that the Flyers would contend and finish 3rd in the Metropolitan Division with 102 points. I was called, you're smoking crack. You know, so like, you know what I mean? But this is the stuff. But this is the stuff that the cards that I was dealt. You know what I mean? And I'm just speaking for my own here. You know what I mean? But it was just like, oh, the Devils are going to be the Devils are so good because they went out and picked up Wayne Simmons. They went out, and got this guy, and stuff. Then the Rangers were going to be so good because they got Panarin, which was a great addition, and he should definitely win the Hart Trophy. Panarin had a hell of a year, and I ain't taking anything away from what Panarin did over there. But like the Rangers went out, got Panarin. Oh, man, you know what? The Rangers are going to finish. Pittsburgh will finish ahead of us. It was just the list went on and on, but yet those people were proved wrong. So now it's time for people to prove me wrong. So if this situation does arise, prove me wrong that Alex Lyon cannot go in and possibly steal a game.
Well,
Ustimenko could come in and possibly steal one game. And I'm not saying a whole playoffs, but they are good enough to withstand, to possibly keep the Flyers in a game for them to win it.
Yeah. Well, Ustimenko is also one of the guys that you see multiple tweets from Hall and people that are in the facility, how good he's looked since camp. So obviously that's a great sign. They brought him up. He's played great, and seeing all that moving forward, you also, of course, have Sandstrom, who struggled a bit this year, but is going to bounce back next year, I personally believe. So he's going to add to your goaltending depth. You have Urson overseas, you got Ross, and then I can just keep going on, so I'm not going to keep listing our goaltenders. But you got we have the goaltending depth that we haven't had in years, which is nice. So I think the big thing is, I'm not trying to pick on this guy here, obviously, by any stretch of the imagination, but Ustimenko and Alex Lyon, in my opinion, are both more talented than Michael Layden. And we had a very extended run with Michael Layden. And I'm not trying to pick on him, like I said. He stepped up big time and had great stats for us, but he was more of a career minor league goaltender. And then finally established himself as a backup a little bit in the NHL after he played decent with us, but still not really. So, we found him a way to fit into our system because Lavi had that system running really well. I think you'd find the same way with AV if the situation presented itself.
Yeah, I just, this is uncharted territory for most Flyer fans, to include myself. We have not seen this in so long. The depth, it wasn't long before that Testawide was our best, prospect within our system, you know what I mean? Or Testawide. Sorry if I mispronounced his name.
Yeah.
But you know where I'm getting at. So it's crazy, the depth, and that's why I'm not concerned. If God forbid an injury does arise, I don't want to see any injury happen, but unfortunately, it's going to happen when you're going right into playoff hockey, and this were the implications that the players knew would possibly happen as well, that they were on board for, because they're chasing what we have come to know now from each interview that comes out. I want to win the cup. How many times over this past week and a half, week and 1 day of training camp that we've had, to where the players were like, oh, no, I wanted to chase that elusive Stanley Cup. But we have to move on because there's something else that needs our attention. So they could only take 31 players total to the hub cities. 52 people within the organization can travel. So 31 players, 21 personnel. Now, you have unlimited goaltenders. There is unlimited goaltenders. So I guess they take a certain amount with them, and if they need them, then they have to pass X amount of tests before they can play. I'm not sure how that's going to go, but 31 players can go. The Flyers are sitting at 34 right now. What are we going to do? Reef, I'll start out with you.
Oh, so, cutting down the roster, it's actually a tough one. We were talking about this earlier today. I think, realistically, you wipe out 2 defensemen and 1 forward. I think there's an option of 3 defensemen there. I think you probably stick with Ustimenko, especially if there's a problem early. I guess it's kind of tough. You really want the veterans, off the top of my head, and I don't think the coaching staff would necessarily agree with me, but maybe like Walensky or Witherspoon or Prosser, one of the, 2 of those guys, and then maybe Andreoff maybe don't make the cut. I could definitely be wrong there. I don't think there's a huge difference there at the end, but I would rather stick with Ustimenko up here. But there is that veteran aspect. There's the veteran aspect of Andreoff. There's the veteran aspect of Prosser, Walensky, and Witherspoon. These are guys who have experience. These are guys who are fully matured. So they're, I would say, the bottom of the talent ring, and I feel bad even saying that. But they have the experience, the physical edge. That would be my choice, would be to get rid of 3 of those 4 players. But the Flyers might think differently. I mean, I don't think they're going to want to get rid of Rubtsov. And personally, I would love to experiment with Zamula if I was Fletcher. And I'd be like, we have some meaningful games here. This kid is very talented. He might be a top 6 player next year, and I can maybe move somebody, which I don't think is necessarily they're rushing into. But, maybe move a bottom end guy or, let Braun walk, right? These are all things which probably going to happen at this point with the cap situation. But again, you're looking for talent within that's cheap. Zamula is that guy. I think that they'll take chances. I would like to see them go with the younger lineup. I guess that's where I would end. I would like to see them take that risk. But we might see a cut that maybe we don't want to see. And maybe Torensky is the guy who gets cut in the end. I don't think it's necessarily fair to him. But Torensky versus Andreoff. I go Andreoff maybe. He's also a center.
Well, Torensky did say yesterday that his objective is to make that plane to Toronto. So that is sitting over his head, and he did have a good game today, scrimmage game. He hit a pot of goals, so that was good. That's big. But he played well defensively as well. So
he's good.
Who knows? Joe, what do you make of that?
Well, I think I was going to say with Carson, I think if he has back-to-back good scrimmage games, then he's almost going to lock himself in as a guy that brings physicality into wanting to make it too, because he's one of the bigger guys on the roster. Obviously, he's the biggest forward on the roster. So he brings that physicality game along the boards, play all that good stuff you want for the playoffs. I think it probably might end up being the older guys as well, because Prosser and Witherspoon have experience, but they have only been solid. They've been more 7th defensemen in the NHL. Like if somebody goes down, you might call upon them. But if you believe Zamula's ready, we know he's more than a 7th defenseman potentially already. And then we know Ghost, obviously, if he's looking a lot better and the healthiest he's been in a while, he's definitely more than a 7th defenseman. So I would say it would probably be those 2. And then depending upon if we take all 4 goaltenders, if we don't take all 4 goaltenders, obviously Ostemenko would be the one that doesn't come. If we do take all 4 goaltenders, it would probably be, at forward, I would think if a veteran's an odd man out, it would probably be Andreoff, because you're obviously not going to get rid of Nate Thompson. You traded for him for a reason. He has all the experience from the playoffs. He's been there with all those teams. You're going to keep him there. I would have to just say, because he only played a handful of games with us, it would probably be Andreoff.
It's both goaltenders, Lyon and Usemenko, filled in admirably today. They both each led up, I think it was 2 goals apiece, which isn't bad when you're playing against all these high-priced, players in a scrimmage, in a practice, and whatnot. I thought that they both held their own, and they have had, both of them equally have had, solid camps thus far, so.
Jamie, I have a question real quick, and I don't know if we know the answer, because I don't know this answer. So let's say they cut Ustemenko, right? They still have unlimited goaltenders. Does that mean he just waits by and can get a call if they drop below? Let's say Alex Lyon gets seriously injured and they need a 3rd, right? Does that mean Ustemenko can get pulled in and he's part of that 31? Because if that's the case, then I think that Ustemenko would get dropped. Not dropped. It wouldn't be picked from that list, just for the sheer fact that they can call him up for injury, where they can't do that with the other names, I would suspect.
That is correct. So there's nothing stating from the NHL on actually what should happen or what transpires. So, I can't really answer that. I did reach out to Bill. Talked to Joe earlier about that. I reached out to Bill Meltzer, and he was going to ask Alain Vigneault that today. Now, with the Carter Hart situation and everything at the forefront today, AV did not speak today. It was Ian LaPerriere, because I think AV wanted to make sure that probably Carter Hart was okay, and if there was anything else going on, or whatever. He had household cleaning possibly to do and stuff, so he didn't speak today. But it was kind of neat to have Ian LaPerriere on today. But so I did reach out to Bill for clarification on what the Flyers would do and how, and he said he would have asked him. So I presume Bill's a great guy. He's never lied to anybody and whatnot. And when he says he's going to do something, he'll do it. It may take him a day or two to do it, but I think I would look for an answer probably tomorrow to answer your exact question. I'm almost willing to bet that the Flyers take 4 goaltenders, to the hub city, to where they don't have to worry about this situation, to be honest. I thought about it, and during our previous conversation that we had earlier on the phone, Yarif, I was sold on Flyers taking 3 goaltenders and, and vice versa, and however the other numbers were to break down and stuff. But I'm almost solid that the Flyers would take 4 goaltenders with them just to have Ustimenko be with the team, because this is this is a different situation. If they want Ustimenko to be part of this team, and you really want to see,
great point, Jamie.
Okay, we could re-sign Brian Elliott at year's end, right? But our plan is to have Ustimenko follow suit and be the backup to Carter Hart the following year. Well, you know what? This is a prime opportunity. So Reef and I, we talked about this with Morgan Frost, just being around the team, and making him feel a part of the team. But you're learning in the same token. You're learning how to be a professional, and that's something that Ustimenko could take away. With him rooming with somebody, it could help his English. Maybe
that's a good
help,
point, man.
Stuff like that.
I totally agree.
I didn't think of
Same
that.
with Zamula.
Yes.
Rooming with somebody can help his English as well. Yeah.
Yeah, great point with Zamula as well.
And we have Provorov, obviously. We have.
That would work perfect. Yeah, that would work well. But I was going to say, I agree with what you were saying. We have, I think they are going to bring potentially 4 goalies, thinking about it now. And I just think, because looking at the roster, obviously we already know Andreev's a guy that can step in. He stepped in and played nicely in a handful of games, and he's under contract for next year. So you're not going to have to worry about convincing him to re-sign. So that's why I believe if you want to bring youngsters, he's just unfortunately probably would be the odd man out, because it's not like you have any convincing there to do. You already have him for next year as a depth player, which is a good thing. So that's why if you're taking all the youngsters, he would be the odd man out at forwards if you're taking all the goalies, and then it would be Prosser and Wotherspoon at defenseman. So
yeah, hey, these are great problems to have, for the Flyers. I mean, when you're talking about, eliminating some phantoms here, some phantoms actually played well, like Wotherspoon played some really good minutes for the Phantoms this past season.
So did Prosser. Yeah,
Prosser played very well. For the Phantoms this past year. He was their middle pairing, guy to a top pairing at times. At defense. When they were really struggling to find defensemen, they were at a defensive clinic. They were recalling David Drake and whatnot from the Reading Royals. At times, because the defense was so depleted with injuries and stuff and call-ups. So these are great problems to have. I just think that the Flyers are on a whole nother pinnacle than a lot of these NHL teams. And we could finish with this topic. And Joe, I'll go to you for this. What do you make of Jake's comments this past weekend in terms of his inconclusive test? Do you agree with Jake Voracek to where the players should have some type of protection in terms of if they are asked the particular injury from the media, then they would give the answer as to what Jake would say. He said, if you want to know, ask me. It shouldn't be, hey, okay, yeah, this player is out with an ankle injury, yada, 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 he's sitting out, Where should the players be protected from here on out, like Jake, says that they should?
Yeah, I mean, I think they should, and I think because it's their own health, I think the other thing Jake was probably getting at is you should be allowed to talk about your own well-being and your own health. It shouldn't have to be labeled unfit to play, because I don't know about you, but if I pulled my back before practice, I wouldn't want the whole entire state or whatever the fan base is going, oh, such and such has the coronavirus for 3 days. And then 3 days later, it's like, oh, no. He just pulled a back muscle. He's perfectly fine. And like, I would have the same reaction as Jake. I'd be like, you all worry too much. Like, what's wrong with all you? Like I would probably have a similar reaction because I think you should be allowed. I know some baseball guys came out and said it when they had it. If you want to say something's going on, you should be allowed because it's your own prerogative legally too. When it's your own health. I don't think the league should say, oh, no, you can't come out and say it if it's your own health. And I think they're kind of adjusting a little bit. It seemed like Jake was a little bit more open than the CBA would say you should necessarily be. So I think the league probably allowed him to be that open, would be my guess a little bit, because he seemed a little bit more open than the CBA says you should be open if you got the unfit to play tag. So I think they're adjusting a little bit, and I think hopefully if players want to have their own prerogative, the league's not going to step in and say you can't say stuff that's your own prerogative because it is your own health. And normally, legally, in any other scenario, you would be allowed to say what's going on with yourself. So,
great answer. I mean, that's pretty good. Reef, do you have anything to add?
With that, I think that comment's really a reflection of the media's relationship with athletes at this point. And I'm not picking on any particular person necessarily, but I mean, you know this. It's funny. We like run a Flyers media site, and my attitude towards media is not, I would say, typical. I'm not huge on like gotcha information, and if I don't really care if I know all the details about injuries and stuff like that. For me, in my opinion, most of the time it's none of our business. I don't really want to reveal information that helps our opponents just because I feel insecure about what a player is going through. But I do agree with Jake. I mean, I always love that he speaks real. I'm not really a huge fan of corporate America or your bosses telling you what you can say and what you can't say. But I think the reason that it's happened is probably the nature with the media over time, the lack of trust that there really is between. Now, the individuals have trust with media. Don't get me wrong. Like individual media people, somebody like Bill Meltzer, we mentioned him earlier. Like that's a guy who gets inside scoops that he probably never tells us about ever, and that's the way it's kind of supposed to be. And you build relationships with people. But I think just with today's internet and tweet, fiascos and all that, I think it's really just a reflection of where we are. And how we're kind of regressing with information. We've had such an abundance of it, and we've abused it to such a degree that I don't necessarily blame the scenario anymore. But I think people like Jake exist for a reason because I think he leads by example in that sense, where he's like, I'm not rocked, I'm not fazed by any of this stuff. And that's what I like about what he said, where he's like, you can come talk to me, he is personally not fazed, and that's what I would want to see. Is that he just seems to be taking everything in stride, and I think the downside with it is that when we don't have information, people speculate, and a lot of times speculation, when done in mass, quick judgment without a lot of information, can lead to a bunch of misinformation. And that's kind of the problem with it. So it's a double-edged sword, but I really do think it's just a reflection of the relationship the media has with business and sports and individuals, fans and everybody.
That's a really good point because everybody did freak out when it was really open at the forefront when everything was happening, and it was like, oh, this guy tested positive, this guy tested positive. Everyone's like, oh my God, we can't do anything now. So I think that's why the league reacted in this stance. I just think, every other stance, like you kind of said, you shouldn't have corporate America making you say, oh, well, if you want to reveal your own health prerogative, I want you to still say you're unfit to play. It's like, but I hurt my back. I don't feel like having people think I have a virus. Like, that should be able to be your own prerogative if you want to say that. That's my own thing. I think they should allow that.
Yeah, and if you guys do recall, I did say that this was going to happen. I said this. I mean, obviously you're not on the podcast every time, Joe, but Jamie, I've been saying this from day one, that at the beginning of this COVID stuff, I was like, expect that the media will not be talked to, and for good reason, because look, you get one story. What was that story about Austin Matthews that came out of Toronto, right? They do not want that at all. Anything like that. at all. I remember 75% of players didn't want to come back. Was that even true at the end? No, but that was reported. So they don't want to hear that stuff. It creates chaos. Like I said, relationship we have with the media today.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point, and it has to be taken into consideration, and that definitely was taken into consideration, obviously, because they're protecting everybody in terms of COVID, back, like Joe mentioned, back injuries and whatnot. But I also like Jake being very honest and saying, you know what, this is my body, this is my health, this isn't your body and your health, so why should you have my information unless I want to give it to you? So I do like his, him speaking out, because Jake is a very rare athlete. There aren't many athletes like Jake that speak, his mind. But he's not disrespectful when he speaks it. You could take it that way at times, and sometimes I have to look too. I'm like, wow. But this is the great part about Jake. He's fantastic. He's a great interviewer. You want a real answer, he's going to give you a real answer. He's not going to sugarcoat that answer, but at the end of the day, this is their health. Why should I have to know, okay, I suffered a shoulder injury today, or something of that nature, why? Just to know that I'm hurt. I'm not able to play. It shouldn't matter, if it's my shoulder or my knee or my leg or whatever. Just know that, I had an injury. Pray for me. That's it. And hopefully I come back, in an allotted period of time. So I do agree with Jake in that, and I was very happy that he was, outspoken with that and stuff. And you know what? The majority of the Flyers fan base backed Jake with that, and that is not a shock because, again, Flyers fans, they're knowledgeable. Like us, they're knowledgeable, they're smart, but they also like to protect themselves as well. So, I saw a lot of positivity in terms of that quote with Jake saying, yeah, why should people know? And because of, I think it was because, like you hinted on, Urief, the Austin Matthews spiraling out of control about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And it's funny. It's funny because 2016, the NHL conducted 2,618 tests for Phase 3. Only 2 came up positive for COVID.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, that's great.
That's pretty impressive for Phase 3. This is the phase that you thought that things would spiral out of control because the whole team is back. They're all practicing on the ice together. They're all in the locker rooms together. And different things and stuff, and doing different things. You would think that there would have been more positive tests. That, to me, is very encouraging moving forward, that there were only 2 positive tests for Phase 3. So the NHL's plan, honestly, and Urief said it would work from day one. It is working. Because when they get to the hub city, there should be 0 people tested positive for the coronavirus. The coronavirus should not be there. And why? Because they only had 2 thus far, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think everything that Jake said is very substantial and true as well. I agree with everything you said, and I think most of, if not all of the fan base on everything he said. I believe everybody will get more comfortable because you're going to know how strict it is. You have testing daily. You have the doorman, the people that touch your suitcase. It's like, oh, did you touch that? You're getting tested now. It's like anybody that comes in contact with anything's getting. The NHL's so careful with this. They're probably the most careful out of any. Not probably. They are the most careful out of any league coming back. So that's going to really be helpful, especially because you didn't pick a hub 6 weeks in advance. And you waited until beforehand about a couple weeks and you went, okay, the cases, obviously we had to move out of the U.S. entirely, but we won't get into that. But the cases were not great here, so we moved to Canada, and Edmonton's a great place to have it because everyone knows there's not going to be a bunch of shenanigans in Edmonton because there's not a lot to get into in Edmonton. And then Toronto was a little bit of a worry for the NHL, I think. but they figured out a way to have that tight knit with the area. I forget what the complex is called, but right around the stadium, around the minor league stadium where the minor league team plays. So they found a way to figure that out there. So I think they've really, really locked this down well, especially compared to baseball, but even compared to the NBA a little bit. So
I saw a very good tweet earlier from Chris Johnston, who does great work. And he said that there will be a lounge at the hub cities, for the players, and whether they want to chill, relax, and watch the games, they could watch, the games as, if they're not, obviously playing at that particular time. So that was kind of neat to see that they've tried to accommodate the players in such a way to make them comfortable. So, and then I
would probably be bringing because lounges, I would probably be extra careful as a player. I would be bringing my wipes and stuff and being like, "Hey, you sat on this chair before?" It's like, "Oh, okay, okay, we're good." I would be like all the people on the radio when you saw people going into studios shifting off of shows. You saw them have their wipes wiping down the whole desk and everything. I wouldn't want to sit in it's just because of somebody could have tested negative 5 hours ago, and then tomorrow morning it's like, oh crap. I just sat in the same chair as this person. Do I want to tell somebody or do I want to play tonight's game? It becomes a dilemma for the players when all that stuff happens too, because you have contact tracing, but you're never going to know everything. Sometimes guys are going to have to come forward, and guys are competitive, so it's going to be a dilemma in your head.
So I said I wouldn't expect much talking to the media. That's all I'm saying.
Well, fortunately, we get the press releases and stuff, so we're able to get the quotes and different things and stuff. Keep, Flyers fans, we're here for you through the pandemic. We have been here through the pandemic throughout. Reef and I have done a show every week through the pandemic, and sometimes Reef did it by himself, for that matter, without me, which was great for him to pick that up. And we put out at least one article per day for the entire pandemic. Now we're putting out anywhere from 4 to 5 articles per day, out now that more content is being flipped in and stuff. And we just want to say thank you, and just be safe. Joe, you could end the show. Reef, you could follow after Joe. Joe, where
Go ahead, Joe.
Viewers find you?
They can find me at JJBorek26 on Twitter, and then like I said at the beginning, True_Philly Sport on Twitter for our podcast, True Philadelphian Sportscast spelled out on Tumblr and Instagram. And when we have a Facebook, that's how it'll be on Facebook, spelled out. And then you can also find me. I write some stuff for Pub Sports Radio, so that's a pretty cool site. So you can find me there as well. And that's pretty much it. Obviously, I appear on some other people's podcasts, but we can talk about that at other times.
Fair enough. And obviously, you guys know where to follow. I just released the Matt Niskanen player profile video. I hope you guys like that one. I have 2 more in the queue. Got Joel Farabee and then Claude Giroux coming up. Those are already done, so they'll be out pretty soon. So expect that to come out. And outside of that, I agree with Jamie. Thank you so much for listening. We will continue this weekly. And for sure, everybody, stay gritty.